Right.
Actually.
Well, yeah, the last time this happened, and like the Texas thing, everyone was like, let's withdraw.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and bring the meeting to order. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the January. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Welcome to the January TTAC meeting. Hope it doesn't still feel like this in February. We do not have a quorum today. I've been informed, so we won't be voting on stuff, but we'll go ahead and go through the agenda. Is that?
Not quite.
Not quite.
We're still 3 shots. But it helps.
We were here at 9:40 to see that.
So we still don't have a quorum. So let's go ahead and start our way around the room with introductions, who you are and who you represent, and we'll see if anybody else shows up. You want to start us off?
Mike Fulkerson, Mappa. Morris Cincy, Nebraska DOT District 2.
Todd Fitzer, Douglas County.
Laura Heilman, Napa.
Evan Schweitz with Metro Transit.
Eric Williams, Papio NRD.
John Krager, City of Bellevue. Owen Stippy, Mappa. Jim Warner, Mappa.
Court Barber, Mappa.
Austin Rouser, Omaha.
Crystal Wassenaar, Omaha.
What view is Shimmer?
Joan Green, ENA.
Anybody online, if you would like to introduce yourself, not required to, but if you'd like to.
This is Mike Kleffner, City of Papillion.
Dave Vermillion.
Brian Guy.
Jeff Subchek, City of Omaha.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Dave Godekid, City of Bellevue.
You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
You know, we're making progress on this virtual.
4 years in.
You have not entered any numbers. Please enter your meeting ID.
We muted everybody. So if you need to speak, please unmute yourself first.
Damian Stern, Nebraska DOT.
All right.
So last chance for introductions. Anybody else online wants to introduce themselves? Okay. So normally we would approve the minutes. We will push that back on the approval of the December minutes to next month. And we will hopefully have a quorum.
If anybody does have any comments on them, I will take them. If you have any issues with the minutes, and then I'll get those addressed before the next meeting.
We've got a couple of recommendations to the MAPPA Board of Directors. So we'll start that off with Michael presenting Amendment 3 to the 2024 TIP.
Yep. So,
Let me bring it up. Hang on a second. It's on a. Oh, it's extra. It's the same one.
oh, it's drag.
Try it. Stop sharing and start. That's how it works. All right, proceed.
So starting off with a document revision, we noticed that there was a slight error when it comes to the exact text for sort of when an Iowa project becomes eligible to become a TIP amendment, which should be at 30% language. For, I guess, funding changes on the Iowa DOT, we had a NHPP funding increase for construction in 24 from 1.4 million to 1.9 million. And then with NDOT, we had a funding increase from 8 million to 13 million of BRI funding for construction in 24. We then had the I-480 Missouri River Bridge had a bunch of funding increases for both NDOT and Iowa DOT, with BRA funding from 5 million to 11 million. Construction 24, as well as some further funding changes from construction increases for Nebraska and Iowa. And then finally, for the for NDOT for N50 N31 intersection, they got awarded a HSIP HSIP funding. So the funding source changed from 700,000 STB to about $870,000 H-ship for construction in 24.
So for the most part, changes to state DOT programs. I want to highlight a little bit more about the TIP document revision on that updated language. The main thing is for Nebraska side projects, there's a kind of a $2 million floor for TIP amendments, and that doesn't apply to Iowa projects. And so we're just adjusting the language to make that clear, so that for projects on the Iowa side, there's not actually a floor. It's a 30% flat amount, and there's no $2 million floor. So basically a lower dollar amount can trigger a TIP amendment for Iowa projects, and we're just capturing that in the TIP. And as Todd said, can't actually have you vote on it, but if you do have any questions or concerns about the amendment, I would like to take them now.
This is Damien. Just kind of clarifying the increases. It's mainly having to do with updating construction costs. These construction costs may be overinflated. We don't have a great deal of projects to pull from comparability wise. I think some of the unit costs that we use that triggered this increase were associated with the Parker to Fort Street superstructure painting project actively going on. If this unit price was compared to something like Mormon Bridge that we completed a handful of years ago, that cost would go down, but I think we are bracing for the worst case scenario with this.
Thanks, Damien.
Do you have broad comments about the impacts of the funding adjustments to the overall?
When it comes to state DOT projects, we show kind of like the state's fiscal constraint in our TIP, but it's primarily handled by the state DOTs. These won't have any impact to our regional program, so there's no changes to any of the like the regional TAP or STBG. This is only an impact to the state. So, and we don't usually bring any kind of like re-demonstration of the state's fiscal constraint when we do these, because they would typically do that when they put in the amendment directly to USDOT for the STIP amendment. We don't usually go that far into the analysis, but we could ask state DOTs for that information.
I appreciate the reminder that it doesn't impact the other programs that are
Yep.
amendments locally.
Sure. Yep. Other questions, comments? Well, all right. Thanks, everybody.
Item C is safety performance measures. Jim Borden.
I'll get back to your orders.
Oh, actually, sorry to interrupt. This is Damien again.
Yeah.
Without quorum for the meeting, how would we proceed with the amendment to this to the board? How is that approached again? I feel like I've maybe asked this before, but I might need some clarification.
We will proceed with taking it to the board. There just won't be an official recommendation from TTAC.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the board can decide from there what they would like to do.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. We're back in the present.
Okay.
Joe.
All right. Morning, everyone. Go to the next slide. Yep, that's fine. So just a quick reminder here, as we look to set
We're going to try this one more time.
Sure.
It's still loading. Give it a moment, Jim. All right. So we should be up. It's gonna, okay. Proceed.
Okay,
Thank you.
wonderful. We'll start all over again there. So we are setting regional safety targets. Following the state setting targets in October of last year. Again, the measures that we set targets for are on the left-hand side of the screen. A reminder, those targets and measures themselves are a 5-year rolling average. They're not the distinct measure year by year. We evaluated them both by linear fit, and you'll see those. Oh, thank you. In an upcoming set of charts, but as a reminder, we did through the MAPA board last year set a target for 0 fatalities and serious injuries by 2040, and so you'll see our projections and targets are based off of that for our safe streets for all goals. We're setting 2024 targets using a baseline of 2018 to 2022 with a projection for last year. And as always, rate is measured in 100 million vehicle miles traveled.
All right, it should work now.
Okay, great. So a quick recap of the process. We used crash data from Nebraska and Iowa Departments of Transportation. We took these targets to the MAPA Safety Committee earlier this month. Presenting to you, again, we won't have the opportunity for a formal recommendation, but these will go to the MAPA Board of Directors next week for adoption, and we'll send that information off to the Nebraska and Iowa Departments of Transportation and their corresponding federal highway offices. Again, quick baseline setting here for the charts. The blue bars are the number of fatalities in this case that our region experienced. The blue line is that 5-year rolling average, which is our measure and our target. The green shaded is just that 5-year rolling average, that period that we're evaluating, and the red is the linear fit. The teal circle there is our projection for 2023, and the star would be the target. So those will remain the same for the following graphs. Just a comment on this here, when we set our targets last year, and then for this year by working a function, it's basically a following track down to 2040. It actually bumped up those fatalities. So we weren't saying then and not saying now that we're looking for fatalities to increase. We were just recognizing that it fits a curve that we've set to get ourselves to 2040. And most importantly, from now on, these projections and targets will be set to be decreasing. For 2022, the Nebraska fatality data is still preliminary. Any questions on fatalities? All right, regional vehicle miles traveled. We put together a traffic report last year and this year, have a bit more information. We've compared to some state BMT assessments that they're doing at the county level, and also took a look at growth of roadways. As you're all aware, we keep on building roads. So what we've had in this VMT calculation is that traffic data that we have on those measured roadways, and then we make an assumption for local roads. We basically just upped that assumption over the last 4 years to account for growth in centerline miles. And we're estimating a 1% year over year, and that's pretty consistent with what the statewide estimates are from their traffic reporting. So for fatality rate, all we're doing at this point is taking that estimated VMT and dividing that into those targets to get our fatality rate projection targets. Looking very similar for serious injuries. Again, what we've seen year over year is that these are decreasing. And in this case, that linear fit fits fairly well with the targets that we've set. Serious injury rates, same as with fatality rates. And finally, non-motorist fatal and serious injuries. So I guess a note on those for Nebraska, the serious injury data for 2021 and 2022 are preliminary. So in summary, from the targets that we set for last year, in all cases, we met our target and we're better than baseline. And these are the proposed baseline, the measured baseline and projections and targets for 2024. Any questions or comments on the process? So we'll be starting up our Safe Streets and Roads for All planning study next month. We'll look to, with that process, and as they do the analysis, we'll have more information to share, both for the reporting side and I think providing more detail to give jurisdictions the ability to, I guess, better apply this data. And then we'll be looking to more formally track our progress by projects or policies that we look to put in place through that funding mechanism or other safety funding sources. Okay. Without any further questions, that completes this portion.
So I'll say it for court here, we can't vote on this, but if you have comments or questions or anything, now's the time, or email Jim on that, on this item. And that is the end of our action items, even though no action was taken. Let's move into discussion items. So the first item there is item D, and that's our quarterly federal funding update.
Yeah. So just like to give you a kind of a brief picture of where the program stands for SDBG and TAP, and then we'll start doing the carbon reduction program as we get projects into that program, which was part of the call for projects that just ended earlier this month. So for first quarter of fiscal year 2024, nothing's really been spent yet. We actually got a little bit of money back on the Nebraska side. A few of the projects that last year didn't end up being quite as expensive as thought. So a little bit of money went back into the pot. We've got about $17.5 million balance on the Iowa side and $3.25 million on the Nebraska side. The projects that you see here, the ones that are highlighted red, so the Council Bluffs South Expressway project, that's gonna slide. The yellow project is kind of a maybe Omaha's roundabout program. They're still trying to pin down exactly what projects they want to apply the funding to. And then the projects in green, Omaha's 3 planning studies, those are moving forward. They've my understanding is you guys already have consultants selected and you're just working on contracts. That's my understanding. I believe that's correct. Yeah. All right. And then Bellevue's 36th Street Phase 2 project, I believe that's moving ahead this year. That's my understanding. I haven't gotten.
That's correct. We
Yep.
are acquiring the last bit of property, should be done by the January.
So that would be highlighted green as well. That was the only question mark that I had in the list of SDBG projects. So most of what we've got in the implementation years moving ahead, it's not a whole lot except for Bellevue's fairly substantial project. That's the big delivery this year. On the TAP side of things, Carter Lakes walking and biking trail, that's supposed to be moving forward this year. Council Bluffs City County Connector Trail, that was supposed to let at the end of last year. They ran into a bit of a funding issue and it kind of got pushed back. So we're still waiting to see exactly what's going to happen with that. Right now, my understanding is it's supposed to happen sometime this year, but it's still question mark. So I've got that in yellow. The Potawatomi County Multi-Use Trail Phase 1, it's been sliding for the last few years. I don't have an official word on whether it's gonna move forward this year, but I've got it in red because I'm assuming it's gonna slide. Gretna to Wearspan Trail, I had it programmed in this year. I have it programmed too early, so it's gonna slide out too. I just haven't addressed that yet. And then finally, preliminary phases on the Midtown Medical Center bikeway connection are supposed to begin sometime this year, with construction slated for a couple of years out. But my understanding is that the preliminary phases are set to begin. So not a whole lot of major deliveries on the TAP side. We're sitting at just under $2 million balance in Iowa and $3.5 million in Nebraska. So a pretty decent amount. And then I'll get into some of the more of the outlay stuff when I start talking about the applications that we received from the call for projects. Any questions right now on kind of where the program sits? All right, well, that's it for that.
So we're staying with court as we move to item E, and that's our call for projects for the 2025 tip.
Yeah, so back in October, we opened up or at the very end of October, we opened up a call for projects for STBG, TAP, and for the first time, the carbon reduction program. We closed the call on January 12th. We got, well, I'll get into that in a moment, but basically, we're past those first two checkpoints. The next thing that we'll be doing is we'll be setting up the applications for public comment. The project selection meetings will be in March and April, maybe a little bit into May. It depends on if we have to slide into May as well. Depends on how contentious the selection becomes. Then we'll have TTAC and board review of the draft tip in May, and then final approval in June with award letters to go out in July. So you should know if you're getting funding early July. For SDBG applications, we got 10 total with a federal request of just about $116 million, quite a substantial ask. We'll have, I haven't gotten a final number for exactly how much money we're going to have to play with, but I'm thinking through 2030, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million, maybe a little bit more than that, at least for the SDBG side of things. So we'll have some decisions to make. Maybe we'll be able to fund half of what's being asked. So that's kind of where that sits. On the TAP side of things, we got about $8 million worth of requests. Oh, and that is on the SDBG side, this is all Nebraska. And then on the TAP side, this is also all Nebraska. We got 2 applications to TAP. I don't think this one's going to be quite as tight. We get about $2.5 million a year for TAP funding, and out through 2030, there's a good chance we'll be able to fund both of these applications. But we'll just have to wait for TAPC's recommendation. For the carbon reduction program, we got 2 applications there as well, with a total request of about $6 million. That's about what we have banked right now, so I think that should also be pretty easy to fund. So I don't think we'll have a whole lot of conflict on getting those funded as well.
I would just make one note on that too. You know, as Court alluded to, the carbon reduction program is new under the infrastructure bill. Without the guidance, we weren't able to do it kind of with our last project selection cycle. But you know, we will have a substantial unprogrammed balance if we fund both of these programs. So we might have to work as a team and say, you know, whether we do another call for projects next year or this program, because the funds do expire within the apportionment expires within the infrastructure bill. So we want to make sure we have a full program, or at least, you know, a program where we can make progress towards this. Might also go into that TAP decision about how we program projects.
Yeah.
Still, that just wanted to note that
Yeah.
we don't want to have a large unprogrammed balance.
Correct. Yep. And then for the Heartland 2050 mini grant program, we got just under $1 million in requests there. So 6 planning studies were requested. Part of that amount, about 250,000, is an Iowa project. So this isn't entirely Nebraska. There'll be there's a little bit of Iowa in here too. So it's about like 700 some on the Nebraska side that was requested. And we didn't do a call for the mini grants last year, so there's a little bit banked in that program. The actual mini grant program should be able to handle that amount. So I don't think there'll be a whole lot of conflict in the discussion around mini grant awards. And then kind of an overall summary, 20 applications total with about $131 million ask. Also have, that comes out pretty well. So primarily roadway projects, with a little bit of the other stuff kind of just sprinkled in there. And then I will say one of the TAP projects we are currently calling roadway project. City of Omaha applied for a road diet on Center Street through the TAP/CRP application. And we've got that lumped into the roadway piece too, but it's kind of a mix of roadway and active transportation. So that it would actually bump up that active number a little bit.
Courtney, I know the committee will take a look at this. You said Center Street road diet. Where's the section they look at?
That piece just west of Hanscom Park.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the full extent of it, but that's it.
Yeah, I noticed a roadway project under TAP, and I was curious what that
That's it.
meant, so that
Yeah.
makes sense now.
Yeah, there'll be some questions that we want to discuss around that as far as specific eligibility, because road diets aren't like, they're not explicitly allowed by TAP, but there is some like additional supporting language related to it. We'll talk about it at TAPC and we'll figure it all out. We'll probably have to talk to the state a little bit. But ultimately, it should be just fine, but it is a little bit of a gray area, so we'll have to discuss it.
Yeah, I know there've been community efforts in that direction in the past, so
Sure, yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then that brings us to, so the next thing we've got the public comment period. We want to open that February 1st. The selection committee meetings have already been scheduled. They're already on everybody's calendar. So we're trying to make that as painless as we can. We scheduled them very far out so that everybody's well aware. We've got 3 meetings scheduled for PROSCOM and TAPC and 2 for the mini grant committee. If we get everything done in 1 or 2 meetings, we won't use the 3rd meeting or even the 2nd meeting, but it all kind of depends on how much discussion we want to have and whether we can come to a decision. The last time we did project selection, it took PROSCOM 3 meetings, so we went ahead and just scheduled 3 just in case. That's it. Any questions about kind of the brief summary? And we'll get into this much more in detail with the selection committees, and then once we've got recommendations from those committees, everything will be brought to TTAC for discussion and recommendation to the board. This is just a little taste.
Thank you, Court. If there's no questions or comments on that, we'll move on. See anything? So item F, is going to go back to Jim to talk about Federal Functional Classification Working Group.
So you will most likely recall we brought to TTAC and board for approval to change the urban area boundary following the 2020 census. The next step that we take in this is we take a look and evaluate and make requested changes to the federal functional classification. A number of reasons for that, you can see clearly we've changed our urban and rural boundaries, and in that classification that component does fit into the federal functional classification, but it's also a good opportunity to grab kind of things that each jurisdiction is looking at as the roadway changes as they grow and build out how they want to go through that process. So quick overview, I guess, on the map here. The outer line in black is the extent of our urban area boundary as it's been adjusted. The 2020 census boundary you can see in blue. Under that in the orange, it just shows the greater extent, and then in red are those areas that had been previously included, which have been removed. So for us, and kind of another next step as we look to our TMA boundary, it did remove the segments in Cass County along Highway 75. So just as a little background, we did make a fairly significant adjustment in 2020 in Nebraska, and we made some changes to support construction work in 2021 in Iowa within Council Bluffs. For us, we'll definitely be looking at that urban and rural status, relinquishment of Highway 85 or 84th Street along a couple jurisdictions still need to be captured, and changes to the functional classification, but really we want to provide a good opportunity for jurisdictions to kind of understand where we're at, what the road network is currently, and make requests through us to Nebraska and Iowa DOT. So related to that, we're of course updating our long-range transportation plan. This year, as I stated, we'll be looking to update the MPO boundary. We've got a requirement to do that by September. And Iowa Department of Transportation will be taking traffic counts in our region, and that's fairly significant. We are counted every 4 years in Iowa by the state, and unfortunately, the last year this occurred was 2020. So they basically, those were not useful counts for us. So that will be good information. One of the things we look at the classification of the roadway is that volume of traffic. In parallel, we're also working with Nebraska Department of Transportation to help them with some updates to the linear referencing system. In particular, for safety, there's a requirement to get a minimum inventory of roadway elements. You can think things like just how does the roadway look, and we can match up crashes to the roadway themselves and just do a little better, gain better understanding into the nature of our crashes. So they have a target for 2026. What that means is we'll be working with the county GIS departments to really kind of help build up that layer. And so in parallel, hopefully working towards eventually a shared roadway network, which has all of this attribute information that helps us talk about and report on our roads. For that Meyer component, really that's local road coverage in Omaha. That's what doesn't exist in that linear referencing system. So what do we want to do? We are currently working with the counties and the departments of transportation to say, where are we at right now, to make sure we have that baseline data. I will include a Google form with the information that the court sends out after the meeting, but we want to make sure that we understand who in each jurisdiction would want to take part. And we'll look to bring you first just some information and call it a working group to bring folks together so we're all on the same page. And finally, to get those changes put in, we'll have to get them soon enough. So first of all, each jurisdiction can put it through their own board or city council. We'll collect those and bring them through TTAC and board to get to the departments of transportation. We expect, from timelines that we have right now, that those will be approved by Federal Highway sometime in early 2026. I do want to note there is new guidance for this year. That the previous guidance was from 2013, and as they did then, they do now. As the urban areas change, they provide some clarifying guidance. I will say one of the things that they did highlight is more of a context-based look at functional classification. So we've not digested all of that yet, but that'll be one of the things that we'll look to bring. But if you are interested, it is the hyperlink there. I think that's all I have to present. We'll get more detailed timelines out to the group, but just wanted to provide you a high level overview.
Jim, in the description here, it says something about processing, the process along with volunteers and things. Will you guys be sending out some sort of a poll, or how do you intend to pursue that?
So we'll send out a Google form, which will allow the group either to put themselves down as a name or somebody else and email contact. And once we have those collected, we'll start a separate distribution with that group and then look to have them. Once we have something definitive, we'll look to either hold a virtual meeting or something where we can have that interaction, because it does take a lot of back and forth to make these changes. So we want to have that group identified as soon as we can and all be on the same page.
It might be valuable, just Jim, you want to talk a little bit about that back and forth in the process? Sure. We're one part of this process. There's a lot of other.
Yep, absolutely. So we, first of all, there's a number of miles that can be put towards each of those classifications. And of course, we are part of that as a region, but they're also bounced off those changes that the state makes. For the relinquishment in particular, that relinquishing Highway 85 takes it off of the NHS and just downgrades it to a minor arterial. So there's room to restructure and move those larger roadways around. But not having it in front of me, I think we'll have to collect a group first, and we'll present those to the DOT to review and give Federal Highway a first cut even before we bring them to any individual city council or board, so that we have a good feeling that they're going to make it through. And that will be iterative. We'll get to the approval stage. And then once we have those through the councils and all of the information collected, we'll make one batch request through TTAC and board.
So I'll shed a little bit of light. I think it was the last time this happened, when Murthy Cody was still at the city, we got to looking at this map and had some heartburn over the way some of the things were classified. So we wanted to know how we could change that. We reached out and the person from the DOT was so thrilled. They're like, nobody's been interested in looking at this for the longest time. So Murthy and I sat down with him, and probably for 2 hours, and kind of went through the whole city and looked at balancing some of the things. It was a very beneficial exercise. So I would encourage you, when this comes out and when it's your opportunity for your jurisdiction to give some feedback, that you take it seriously and take a hard look at it, because it does affect how things operate moving forward, and it does have a lot of value. So I'll be volunteering. I think it's important, and for those of you that haven't been through it before, take a look at it.
Yeah, and that was the last decennial. So we do this after every census update, as Jim noted, because of the urban area boundary. We also did a pretty substantial update in 2020 when there were some changes to NDOT and the expressways and how things were classified. And we also did kind of a local call for updates there as well. So we've been through this a few times now more recently, but I mean, just frankly, doing this in GIS has made it a lot simpler with the back and forth. When we were in the earlier Matt Murphy version, we were going back and forth with microstation printouts. I mean,
We
it just
were.
was not. It was
We
not
had
ideal,
like
so
4 or 5 different color highlights, and we'd go in and,
yeah.
you know.
And it was one of those things where, I mean, just measuring the balance and like how much, you know, sort of, they kind of want the region balanced, you know, so that it's easier for them to balance it at the statewide level, but you know, Omaha metro area is fairly unique as well in terms of the development patterns and things like that. So it's back and forth, but you just want to know it's not, Napa is kind of one step in this process, the TTAC recommendation, the board recommendation, but we are operating within those kind of state balancing processes as well, which is longer timelines.
Thank you. Okay, item G, we have a traffic report from Owen.
So I get
Before Owen gets started, I just want to highlight one change. Josh Corrigan has left us for a position at the Army Corps of Engineers, and Owen was recently promoted to be our GIS coordinator. So welcoming Owen.
So in December, we gave a presentation on these traffic reports at the draft level to get feedback. We gained some feedback through our online process feedback form, and so we've integrated 1 or 2 changes that were suggested. And so now we are on to presenting the traffic reports as a finished document. We'll present that first here and then to board as well to get approval, and then we'll go from there. So as we've gone over before, every few years, MAPA aggregates these traffic counts that we get from the various agencies around the state and the local county level, and we adjust those into a regional data set over the MAPA TMA area. And this report will show volume changes since the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've also kind of adjusted it to show prior to, so that there isn't too many, you know, like outliers that were induced by COVID. This graph here just shows the different traffic counts that we've gained over these last 6 years. You can see that in 2021, coming back from the pandemic, we got a blast of data, and we were able to integrate all of that really well. We adjusted a lot of numbers to factor in the pandemic. And now in 2022, we're kind of at a still higher level. We've been getting a lot more numbers from the Omaha and NDOT numbers, so that's been very beneficial for our data. Iowa, unfortunately, was part of the 2020 count cycle, and they have not published the 2020 data because of the pandemic impact, but we do expect to have numbers from them very soon. So along with the regional traffic patterns report, we also publish a top traffic interchanges and top traffic intersections documents. You can see here that most of the top traffic interchanges were along that 680 and I-80 corridor, and there weren't too many changes from the last time that we published this report. I do remember seeing that the West Center Road and I-680 one was not in the top 10 before and has jumped up into that now. Top traffic intersections also did not change as much, but you do see there at number 8, the 132nd and West Center Road, that kind of exemplifies that same interchange growth. So we've been looking at that, but otherwise changes were pretty static, 90th and West Dodge being the busiest intersection in Omaha. I'll leave it here for a bit so that people can digest it, but like I said, there weren't that many changes from last time we published the report.
You know what the previous ranking on 132nd Center was?
I don't, but it was outside the top 10.
I think it was top 50.
Well, the reason I'm asking is we predicted that the volumes would go up by 25 or 30% once that improvement happened, because it was a bottlenecking there, and it appears that that's happened. I was just curious.
Yeah. So this shows, oh man, the picture is kind of blown out. You can kind of not really tell the classes there, but this shows the traffic pattern growth in VMT from 2020 to 2022. This kind of shows that 2020 was an outlier. You can see some of the numbers are pretty extreme in the growth, but that's because there were such low counts. So it's hard to trust this. You can see that VMT grew by 13% from 2020 to 2022. But then when you compare it to 2018 pre-pandemic, you can see that the numbers are much different. The growth is a little bit more stable. Although if you compare back to that area, the outer Douglas and urban core, you can see that that is where a lot of the growth kind of maintains up there near Bennington. So it's something that we're watching growth down in southwestern Sarpy County as well. But from 2018 to 2022, VMT only grew by 5.8%, whereas 2021 to 2022, the growth was only 3%. So it seems that growth is slowing down in that sort of acceleration from the pandemic, but there is still steady growth along that outer, that urban core outer Douglas border. I got to type one. But you can see that within the urban core and in the Iowa side, there's still a lot of drop in the VMT. So we broke it out by FFC. You can see that from 2019 to 2020, there was a huge drop. Again, the pandemic, a large amount of growth from 2020 to 2021, and now it's kind of stabilized going into 2022. This just once again shows, but in graph form, that sort of functional class growth and decrease. And like I said, it's stabilized some going from 2021 to 2022, but there's still steady growth. This is just to show that we have a traffic data portal that we built using GIS tools, ArcGIS Online specifically. We built this to allow kind of a deep dive into the weeds onto every one of these specific corridors, specific intersections. And you can also see charts that break out by intersection or by corridor exactly what those numbers are. So if you're interested in kind of getting into the specifics, please use our data portal, and there are links to it within this presentation for all of our documents as well as that data portal. And please forward any of your questions that you or your organizations might have to us.
Is that the data that you've got there, is that in-person traffic count data, or is that some kind of other digital thing?
We have automated traffic counter data that we get. So that's both from the state level, we've got those traffic counters. I don't believe that we mix in any sort of like mobile data, but that would be great if we could.
We've evaluated that, Eric, and a lot of those tools where you're using cell phone data, they're normalized to traffic counts that are done either with tube counts or with automatic traffic data controller. So our ability, I would say, to leverage those technologies is really go back to that traffic count chart, like the number of traffic counts. The more traffic counts, kind of that velocity of traffic counting that we have at the local level, local and state partners, helps us leverage those tools because they basically use it as sort of an additive to what's happening actually on the ground. And I would say we've seen a large pickup. I don't remember the number, Jim or Owen, of automatic traffic data collectors, but I know that there's been several more added at some different locations around the metro area, which again helps us have more continuous data sources, which is something that they're definitely the most helpful. And I don't know if you want to talk about the INRIX tools as well.
Sure, yeah. So the state, Nebraska was part of a full fund study. I don't know if that's finished yet, but as Mike said, it would be looking at data that's already built upon data that had been measured. So NDOT has added a counter on I-40 at Leavenworth was the most recent addition there. And we were able to make use of some of the Council Bluffs interstate system construction. They had some counters along that for the purpose of construction. And they do have a good number of counters along those segments now that they're just working through how do they get that data. It doesn't go into their formal reporting yet, but I'll make the plug. Any jurisdiction counts that are taken, we'll take whatever you can get, because that really helps us with the coverage. It's trying to get those kind of outer fringe counts where we're not looking at those higher volume roads, I think in particular, that really help us understand the contribution of the local road network and to kind of bring that whole network together. So we will talk to you about how we did with our travel time reliability, and that is based on that INRIX data, trying to find a way to marry that up with what we actually see as traffic volumes and kind of those patterns throughout the day is still probably, there's still quite a bit of work to be done there.
Yeah, and within the documents, you can kind of see our process for how we came to some of our estimated counts, how we did some of the traffic smoothing between places where there are older counts versus the more current counts. So if there's any questions along that process, please let us know. Otherwise,
Sorry, one more. You had up the VMT numbers here.
Oh, sure.
Those are aggregate regional VMT. That's not normalized per capita. This is the same question I asked.
yeah, this is by traffic analysis district, so it's aggregated, yeah.
And, okay, and so there is eventually going to be some work. I guess the question is, are people driving more individually? I mean,
Yeah, per
And is this-
capita, it's not something that we have our fingers on right now, yeah.
just making sure because we have it. As going through the minutes, I was like, yeah, we talked about that. But,
Yep.
Upcoming LRTP, we'll look at that. right?
Exactly.
Okay, same answer. Good. Thanks.
Yep. So that is the, oh, sorry. Back down to,
Oh, sure.
Okay, this is normally when we'll go around the room and do some member agency updates.
So I have a traffic question before we move on, if that's okay. Better than the last one. So a little bit for both of you, probably a little more towards Jim's presentation earlier, but I was on KFAB recently and asked how I felt about Omaha drivers. And I wasn't about to insult a million people on live radio, so I lied. And so I think they're doing a pretty good job.
You know, those people-
You're being recorded.
Sorry. There's not the same audience with here that you can.
But you can pull that out, right? Court?
We're gonna put it on Twitter. So in terms of like kind of the combination of traffic growth and safety, I mean, where do you think we rank in terms of relative how good drivers are to other MPOs? And how do you think drivers are adapting to conditions, taking safety, and, you know, with the growth in traffic, and obviously you've got delays and things like that. So what's MAP's opinion on that?
Yeah. Well, I can talk a little bit about, I mean, also, I think when we look at, you know, even through a Division Zero process, like in some of the Safe Streets work that we did to apply for that regional grant, you know, I would say there's a lot of similarities that we have to other regions. I think if you look at our high injury network that's identified through our regional process or through Division Zero network, it looks a lot like other high injury networks across the country. I would say where we may stand out, you know, in terms of really kind of maybe Nebraska in particular, but even somewhat in Iowa, you know, seatbelt usage much lower in Nebraska. I would say impaired driving higher than in some other states that we see. And we see those contributing to a lot of the fatal crashes that we see around the region. I would say when we did our Safe Streets application as well, you know, we had to focus our efforts on local roadways. So we had to pull the share of fatalities and serious injuries from the interstate system, the freeway system, out of our analysis, kind of showing the baseline of where we were starting this effort. And frankly, you know, our share regionally of crashes that happen on the freeway system is larger than in other places. So like, you know, you see, you know, where we do have local crashes, they kind of mirror the pattern and distribution of other regions, but the share of, say, major arterial fatalities in our region is lower than in other regions. So I would say what that does for MAPA in our perspective, it redoubles efforts for things like traffic incident management, you know, our supporting motorist assist program, and really looking very carefully as we're making some of those MTIS investments that, you know, systemic safety is a key part of it, you know, knowing what we know now, having this safety lens in focus. So, you know, it's kind of a mixed bag, I would say. I would say the distributions look similar, driver behavior, you know, certainly we've seen speeds tick up. If you look at police department reports and state patrol reports, speeds have continued to be incredibly high on major roadways in particular, but even, you know, major arterials. So that aspect of driver behavior hasn't kind of maybe gotten better since COVID, but it's a mixed bag. But I guess that from our perspective, from our, you know, our seat here at the regional level, that's kind of what we see in patterns. So I wouldn't say there's any one kind of major outstanding thing, but there's certainly places where we think we can add value to this conversation.
Yeah, I just think anecdotally and from conversations I've had with police officers, it seems like we have pretty bad group of drivers. I just didn't know if there's any data connection.
The traffic incident management group is really good. In Iowa, there's a lot of data collected and presented that kind of shows patterns. I think how drivers operate in and around construction zones, whether they be major ones on roadways or just responding to utilities, is also an area that can be focused on, because I think we might travel longer distances, and generally, if it's reliable, we can get where we want to quickly. And I think drivers struggle when they can't get where they want to, whether it's weather or construction. I think that's when maybe poorer decisions are made. But that's a real off the cuff assessment.
Yeah.
We really want to understand all of the characteristics of these crashes, and driver behavior is a big one. Emergency services and response timelines is another one that I think is really important.
I want to throw out another one, and that's enforcement. And I've been saying this for a decade now, and I know that Austin's team that's looking at Vision Zero has law enforcement on that team, but I won't ask, but I've asked in past meetings, quick show of hands, don't have to tell on yourself, but do you or a friend have a ticket for running a red light or speeding in this community? And it's very rare that a hand goes up. There's very little enforcement here. And when there's no enforcement, what happens? People drive faster and they run red lights. That's just a fact of life. And I think that has to change. And that's a different group than this. I know our law enforcement people are taxed with lots of things, and I know that they'll tell you that they don't have the resources to do that. But I do believe we don't have red light running cameras in Nebraska. I know Iowa does, and I know they're very effective. But we don't have that tool, and we have very little enforcement. And that is a contributing factor. I don't know what percentage of a factor it is, but it is a contributor. And I want to say it because this group has a voice, and I want everybody to continue to think about how we can get that to improve.
We did evaluate, along with the city of Omaha, a tool that NRIX provides, a safety tool that did kind of balance speeds that they see on roadways, and it did use GM vehicles as well. It uses things like hard braking or acceleration, so it did show some things. Unfortunately, the roadway characteristics that were underlying it didn't provide a lot of value, but from what we did look at in areas, it gave us an opportunity to look and see, and you're right, we did see higher speeds in areas where we know the roadway can allow for it, and drivers take advantage.
There's a group called Quote Wizard, which is an insurance analyst. And amongst the top 70 largest cities in the United States, as of 2023, we're ranked 40th for accidents. So seems good.
Okay, let's move on to member agency updates, and maybe we want to just start around the room, right? Austin, would you like to get us started, or?
I think, from a construction standpoint, obviously there's not much happening right now. I know we're between phases with 168 and getting ready to switch that over next year for the last portion of it. And that, that project's gone pretty well for the most part. I don't know, coming up, Krista, do you want to hit on design and anything that's coming our way?
Yeah, so I've got 2 projects that will be coming out for RFP in the next couple months. I don't know the exact time when, but look out for Midtown Medical Bikeway. That will be coming through NDOT, and then Ames Avenue Pell will also be coming through NDOT. And then standard specs will be going to council here at the end of the month, beginning of February, for formal approval.
And I will say, since you mentioned the Midtown, the bikeway, I've had some conversations with the streetcar movement. We have talked a lot about, recognizing the fact that, okay, well, Omaha is a car-centric community now, but we recognize that things are starting to transition, and there's more popularity and resource given to other modes. So we're working through some of our maintenance activities. Snow removal is obviously a big highlight right now, about how we approach some of those things in the urban core, along some of the pedestrian routes, along some of the bike routes, and coming up the streetcar route. So just from an operational standpoint, we're starting to take more of a holistic look at how we do things in select areas.
And I would say also, one piece of context I would add to that too is transit, just because, you know, pedestrians and all of that. So that's a great opportunity and a great effort.
You know, Evan has had no issues with the BRT stops, right? Last week or two.
That's right. Not a lot of like, my driveway is any indication, where do you put this?
Austin, we can talk offline after, but are you guys trying to get back at me for all my years of leadership at the city with the way they plow my cul-de-sac? Or is it just a coincidence?
Would you still live in the same place?
Let's move to an SID and then you can.
I'll check on that for you.
Morris?
Yep, okay.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Let's see, Highway 75, Murray to Plattsmouth, all the northbound and southbound lanes are open. We got a little work to do this year. I think we need 13 northbound left-hand turn lanes to build. But all the lanes are open, 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. We still got some work to do on those bridges from Highway 34 and down Highway 75. That'll be taken care of this spring. We're still on hold for the I-480 bridges at 20th from Missouri River. It's for the overhead sign structure that goes up about 8th Street or somewhere in there. Highway 64 Maple Street, Elkhorn River East is done. The I-80 accident investigation sites are done. They are on the off ramps at Giles, 72nd, 60th, 84th, and 13th. So we're done with that. Kennedy Freeway, northbound Q to F. We've got a little permanent striping to do this spring. That's it. North Freeway, Hamilton to Ames. Right now, we're done with Parker Street and Lake Street is done. We have Binney Street and Sprague closed right now over the winter for the deck repairs and approach replacements. And that's about it until we start it all up in the spring with the mill and overlay down below. But we're back to normal lanes on 75 for the winter. And then Highway 50, 370 to Industrial Road, that work's supposed to start April 1st. That's all that work goes right through the middle of Millard. And another one coming up, another April 1st start, Highway 6, or Dodge Street, 192nd interchange. That's where we're gonna build a diverging diamond interchange there. And we're adding auxiliary lanes for future expansion on all the ramps. And then we'll be doing the deck repair on the Highway 6 bridge itself. But we found out at our pre-con utility meeting that MUD has 20 weeks worth of work to do there. They didn't get the plans early enough to design it. So we're trying to figure out what to do. So that's supposed to start April 1st. We'll see. That's all I got. Maybe we ought to just close 192nd. Exit ramps, everything.
Morris gave me a great lead in. That's what I was going to talk about. Our biggest struggle at the county continues to be utility coordination and delays associated with such, primarily the fiber companies. So I've been working with, I don't know if some of you know Steve Fanslau, used to be at OPPD. He is now a consultant. I had a great meeting yesterday with him and Tim O'Brien, talk about some of these issues. And I'm going to be reaching out to Austin. I'll give you a call sometime next week. And I just want to get together with the city of Omaha folks and brainstorm about a couple of things, maybe look at some of your verbiages and some of your contracts. We at the county have historically not used financial incentives at the end of a project, and we are getting taken advantage of it. So we got a couple changes we need to make, but that was, like Austin said, we don't have a lot as far as projects right now. I will say that we just got the last signature for right away. We will be paving 222nd Street from Q Street to the north to tie in. It's about a half mile to tie in where that paving ends, get rid of some of that dust control issue. The gentleman that wanted to be paid a lot of money for his right of way was also going to be the biggest impacted person from when the dust goes away. So he was playing hardball, and we finally just said, well, we'll just wait as long as you want, but you're gonna one that's gonna live with the dust until you sign this document. We're offering you a fair price. So he said, I'll talk to my wife, and she called us a day later. So we were happy to get that signature. So it's just a fun little story about that, we are gonna get that one done. That's gonna be a roundabout at 222nd Q and then paving to the north.
If there's any role for MAPA to pull kind of a TTAC type group together on the utility coordination, I know railroad coordination, the state's doing a little bit of leadership on that side of things too, but we're happy to do that. We're doing some similar work with utilities on some other projects right now.
There may be, we're never gonna, it's never gonna be done. And I'm not, I always tell my staff, I wouldn't want to trade places with somebody at MUD or OPPD right now. They're going through very difficult times with aging infrastructure and expanding infrastructure all at the same time. It's a challenge. OPPD shared with me yesterday that they're looking at a 50% growth by 2030 in their amount of employees and infrastructure, 50% in the next 6 years. That's massive. I mean, it's just a huge undertaking. So not being critical of anybody when I talk about this, but it is costing our taxpayers a lot of money, and it is making our streets less safe. And that concerns me. So I think it's worthwhile to look at.
I have nothing.
Floor delegated to you.
There we go. No major updates from me, I guess.
Okay, I don't want to pile on too much with utility coordination, but February 1st is the scheduled start date for Platte River Bridge Trail, and we are doing preliminary utility coordination to make sure that the abutments piling can be done as scheduled. We'll find out if that happens. We think we have a plan for that. But yes, same challenge there because they have, I don't know, apparently didn't focus on it enough. I think fiber is the one that we're concerned with right now. So hope that'll get resolved and we can start working on putting the trail bridge on the existing highway structure. The Elkhorn River Trail Bridge State TAP project, we have received the agreement with for environmental services. We're waiting on the agreement for design services. We hope to have that ready so we can get that design work started here soon. So yeah, moving that forward. Not a federal aid project, but the Golfing Green Drive crossing to the West Patio Trail. We just did the walkthrough yesterday afternoon, which was exciting in the snow. We had to kick it out of the way to verify the sealing on the joints. But I mentioned that one because it's an example of an intersection of active transportation and vehicular transportation. And I appreciate the coordination with Omaha on getting that done. That was the successful access point to a highly utilized trail. And so it's important to get people safely to the trail when they want to use it. And I think there's other successes pointing in that direction as well. My understanding is the Keystone Trail crossing at Fort Street will include a hawk signal now. So I think that aligns with the Vision Zero and other safe transportation best practices. So again, thanks to Omaha for helping to coordinate that safe crossing location. And I think there's going to be more locations in the future where our active transportation is going to be encountering our roadway network and our vehicular transportation. The West Center Road project kind of points in that direction as well. So I think keeping an eye on how active transportation safety is prioritized when we do design work is going to be increasingly important. And again, I appreciate the coordination from Public Works, Planning, and Parks on the projects that we've done in the past. I think we've had a lot of good recent successes. I think there's going to be more opportunities for that type of collaboration in the future. So thanks for what we've done and looking forward to more of that. And lastly, as far as utility growth in the future, I trust that OPPD is up to the challenge. I think that they'll have what they need to make sure that we are coordinating successfully there in the future.
Switching hats.
There you go. Yeah, thanks.
On that coordination piece with West Center Road, I would like to make sure that we somehow find a good connection to Field Club Trail with that. Just for that may be wayfinding.
That note's right down here. So,
a great change there. So
yeah. Coordination with the county and the golf course, I think is going to be critical there. I think there's some opportunity, but it will probably need some significant collaboration to make that happen. I think the north side is probably best. But when that comes to the committee and we review whether or not that gets funding, which I hope it does, I think the NRD will be ready to initiate a conceptual study on the connection from Field Club up to Center to get to the road diet section, to get to Hanscom. We've been talking about that for a couple of years now, so I'm very glad to hear that project got submitted. And we're ready to help lead the next step to get that connection established as well. So I strong agreement on that.
Man, I should have had you write a letter in support of it.
Did you submit that one?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I was just gonna ask. Kudos.
He's on the committee, so.
Krista, was there a development that's coming that prompted that? Because we looked at that a few years ago and then the developer kind of faded into the shadows and.
No, we've known that we've had a lot of comments on it in the past, and it was identified in our Vision Zero plan as a project, and we thought that would be a really good project. It almost checked all the boxes, and so that's why we thought this is like a perfect one to add for the request. Yep. It was Jeff Rieselman's idea. Go Jeff.
All right. Go Jeff.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Krista?
No.
Okay.
John? So we already talked about the 36th Street project, phase 2 from Sheridan Plat 2. We're hoping to get all of the properties acquired by the end of January and get that bid and hopefully get started this spring. We do have our overland concrete projects, so we can get those bid out in February, March. We also have utilities coming through. I guess it's mostly fiber optic. We have a lot of fiber optic networks coming through our.
I'm hearing a theme.
Yeah. So we've been dealing with a lot of that and hoping that we can keep ahead of it. So that's all I've got. Art, got anything?
Anything from our.
Well, my birthday was this weekend. So
Major.
I lived another year.
Survivor. 49 still, is that right?
Is this being recorded?
Yes.
The court said it is.
No comment.
Anything else?
So just one update on the MAPPA side of things. I know many of you or folks from your jurisdictions were on the call with Congressman Bacon's office about the federal funding requests through the project funding earmark process. Just a reminder, if you are putting in a request for highway funding, please coordinate with us because it does cause a little bit of a scramble drill on the back end when those get appropriated if we don't kind of have foresight on those in the tip and things like that. And there's a tip, consistency question in there. Most of them have just answered it no, that's fine, but just give us a heads up if you are requesting those. It makes the process on coordination with the DOT a little bit easier, and Iowa DOT for that matter. But it's just one of those things where new projects popping up out of nowhere, we want to make sure we have a good, strong handle on what those are. But it has proven to be a beneficial source of funding for projects around here in the region. So I want to make sure we take full advantage of it.
Oh, yeah, we can. Would anybody online like to share anything? Does anybody have any updates to provide? Oh, we do have one chat comment. Nothing from Council Bluffs.
No more agency updates?
This is Damien. Specifically regarding any kind of program adjustments in the next, say several months, I'm sure we will be reassessing our fiscal year budgets for the next several years. We'll continue to work with any municipalities, specifically City of Omaha, who has the biggest share of most of our impacts. Just regarding any kind of CIP updates, program books, that sort of thing. So we'll just keep in touch.
Thanks, Damien.
Any more agency updates? Okay, with that, if there's any additional business, now's the time to bring that up. Otherwise, we will adjourn. Anything anybody else wants to bring up? Not seeing any hands. Anybody online? Now's the time. Well, with that, we don't have a quorum, but I would propose we adjourn. Anything else? We can't vote on this, but if you have feedback, let court know.
So much better.
Making it?
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about, well, all the snow.